Hi, I'm Monica. I'm a sports and exercise physio, and today I'm here to break down the injury of the well-known tennis player Holger Rune, or as we say in Danish, Holger Rune. If we have a look at the footage of when Holger ruptured his Achilles tendon, he was hitting a backhand, he recovered to the centre of the court, and then he was moving to hit his forehand. And in that second last step, I believe he would have felt something happen there, because as he hits his forehand, his left leg is really high up, which isn't a natural position, and he looks quite off balance, and is actually rotating away from the net in this moment. And then on that last step, you can then see that recoil in his leg. He was unable to put much weight through that leg, and he was really struggling to push off that left foot. From the assessment as well, he couldn't move his foot up and down, especially pointing it down, as the Achilles would have been ruptured here. He did report hearing a pop as well, which is also an indicator that he had ruptured his Achilles at that moment. As we can see, the way that Holger has ruptured his Achilles, it is quite a common mechanism. So normally there is a sudden push-off involved, and the ankle is often forced upwards into a position of what we call dorsiflexion, and in that time there's also a very sudden and forceful calf contraction that occurs. And in that position, your Achilles tendon is already elongated and lengthened, and when you combine that with a strong calf contraction, it does place more load on the Achilles tendon, and it does mean it's more susceptible to an injury such as a tear or a rupture. The Achilles tendon connects your calf muscles, your gastrocnemius and your soleus, to the heel bone, and it is a strong and elastic structure that's designed to store and release energy, which is what we need when we're running, jumping and moving. Now, Holger is only 22 years old, and he's ruptured his Achilles tendon. So let's have a look at some of the things that may have contributed to this injury for him. We know that tendons, they react to changes in load. They can react to changes in volume, frequency, intensity, and in this high level, any subtle change can play a role in this injury. The game of tennis has actually changed, where the courts and the balls are a lot slower than they used to be, and what this means is the matches are lasting longer. And if the matches are lasting longer, this means that players are doing a lot more sprint efforts and they're changing direction a lot more. So their volume has spiked up. With this spike in volume, this can annoy a tendon and irritate a tendon, and it can make it susceptible to having pain or an injury. If we're looking at the context here, Holger was playing at Shanghai prior to Stockholm, where he actually made the quarterfinals of that tournament. And then he went into Stockholm, and in Stockholm he actually made the semis, so he's been playing a lot of tennis, and then that's where the injury has happened. Shanghai is known to be a very slow, hard court, and he played a lot of tennis there. So he had that increase in his training load from that tournament leading into the Stockholm tournament. And because he's made it further into tournaments, he would have increased his frequency and he would have increased his intensity as he's playing more matches, which is more intense than a training session would be. I believe Holger entered that semi-finals match at Stockholm with a hamstring injury present. Now, the hamstring injury itself will not directly influence the Achilles tendon. However, if there is a hamstring insufficiency there, then you would anticipate that the calf muscle would be loaded a lot more than it normally would to try and compensate for the hamstring issue present. And that would potentially then place more load onto that Achilles. Other thing to consider here is the change in the playing surface. As you head towards the end of the tennis calendar, players would have gone from playing on clay and grass court back to playing on hard court, and the hard court is a lot firmer, which means there's less shock absorption present, and that does place a lot more load on your tendon. Tennis itself is already a very repetitive sport. There's lots of change of direction, lots of sprint efforts. It's a very long calendar year at the elite level, and tennis has a very short off-season compared to other sports. A lot of players have been opening up about the burnout that has been experienced physically and mentally. Since the injury has happened, Holger has undergone surgery to repair his Achilles tendon. He was in a cast for 2 weeks, non-weight bearing with 2 elbow crutches, as we saw. And in this time, he was also seen doing lots of other things, which is great. So he's been still doing upper body strength, still doing core strength, still trying to strengthen and do work on the other side. And it was great to still see him on the court hitting seated forehands. And after 2 weeks in the cast, he was then transitioned into what we call a vacoped boot, which is essentially an Achilles boot where you can actually change the range and the degrees of the boot to dictate how much movement you want at that ankle. Now, this is important. The surgeon will dictate this and will also dictate how much weight bearing Holger is allowed to put through there. but it's going to be a very steady progression as you want the tendon to heal in the best position possible. He will be in this Vacoped boot for 6 weeks. Now, in this time, there's still so much Holger can do. He can still keep working on his strength like he has been, and he can still do lots of off-feet conditioning work, such as, seated battle ropes, assault biker for arms only, seated boxing, single leg cycling. So there's lots of things he can still do to try and maintain his conditioning. And he can still do some calf isometric work in the boot and still do some ankle movements below a neutral position. After 6 weeks in the boot, so he'll be 8 weeks after surgery, he'll then be able to do a bit more through that ankle. So the surgeon will typically progress his weight bearing and he should be able to put full weight through that leg. He can slowly start to do gentle calf stretching, but it's important that he doesn't push this because, again, the tendon is still healing from the surgery. With his rehab, Holger will need to tick off certain criteria to progress into different phases. So once he has adequate strength, he'll then be able to start some plyometric work and start going back into some running, to then go into more change direction and agility work and a bit more progressions on the court. However, it's important that Holger does tick off these progressions along the way and does not rush this process. All up, we could be looking at about a 9 to 12 month recovery and return. In Holger's case, I wouldn't rush back. He's only 22 years old. He'll still have many years left in his tennis career. It's not a process you want to rush, as you want to make sure your body is well prepared to get back into the game. You don't want to risk injuring other parts of your body either. Although Holger's ranking will be dropping as he's out of action from this injury, he will be able to enter tournaments under what we call a protected ranking. He will be able to use the ranking at the time of the injury to enter tournaments. He could be trying to aim to get back end of next year in 2026 for something like the Paris tournament. However, he might decide to not push it and just prepare for the Australian tennis swing in 2027. From what we've seen so far of Holger and his rehab process, he looks super motivated. He looks like he has great support around him. I don't see any issues as to why he won't be able to bounce back from this very well. Thanks for listening. I hope you found this video super informative. I am planning to do future videos on other athletes and the injuries that they have sustained. So if there's any athlete you'd like me to analyse at all, just pop it down in the comments.